Poor girl reveals to the grieving millionaire, "Those girls live near me." What was supposed to be just another day bringing flowers to the cemetery turns into a nightmare far worse than death. The daughters he mourned for years were alive. But the closer he gets to the truth, the more he realizes the lie was only the beginning of something far darker. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The light July rain painted the windows of the Kensington mansion with that melancholy typical of London. Inside, Michael Taylor watched the distorted reflection of the lights from Kensington High Street through the fogged glass without really seeing anything. For 2 years, his life had been reduced to this: enormous walls, deafening silence, and a routine that felt more like a punishment than an existence. At 42, Michael was the picture of success that had ceased to matter. Graduate in business administration from the LSE, he had built an empire in the real estate market. Commercial buildings scattered across the capital bore his signature. The accumulated wealth would be enough for 3 generations to live comfortably. But none of it mattered when he woke up every morning in that 700-square-meter house and remembered that he was completely alone. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when those rooms echoed with children's laughter. Laura and Julia, his twin daughters, used to run barefoot across the marble floor, leaving wet footprints after playing in the heated pool. Beatrice, his then-partner, would host dinners with friends and fill the dining room with lively conversations about art, politics, and their plans for the girls. Life pulsed there. Everything changed on a Tuesday in March. Michael still remembered every detail of that damned day. He was in an important meeting with Japanese investors when he received a call from Clara, the housekeeper. Her voice trembled in a way he had never heard before. "Mr. Taylor, something terrible has happened. Mrs. Beatrice and the girls..." There was an accident on the motorway. They were heading to the cottage in the Cotswolds. And the rest of the sentence was lost in a black hole. Michael didn't remember leaving the meeting room, crossing the city in the infernal afternoon traffic, or arriving at the hospital. The next few hours were a confusing blur of white corridors, doctors with grave expressions, and words that seemed to come from very far away. Missing. Without a trace. Inexplicable circumstances. We are still investigating. The official version was never completely clear. There were contradictory reports. Witnesses who saw Beatrice's car swerve off the road, others who mentioned a second vehicle. The police spoke of a possible kidnapping, then backtracked. They mentioned a planned escape, then dismissed it. In the end, all that remained was an administrative void. 3 people who had simply ceased to exist in the records, as if they had been erased from reality. A week later, they held a symbolic memorial service. Beatrice had arranged everything beforehand, through documents that no one could quite explain how they had appeared. There were detailed instructions, a prepaid memorial, specific flowers. It was as if she knew it was going to happen. Michael attended the ceremony in such a deep state of shock that he barely registered the faces of the people present. Work colleagues, distant relatives of Beatrice, a few mothers from the girls' school, all with that look of pity he had grown to hate. Empty words about overcoming and time heals all wounds that meant absolutely nothing. When he returned home that night, something inside him broke for good. The twins' rooms remained exactly as they had left them. Dolls scattered on the floor, coloring books on the small tables, little clothes hanging in the wardrobe. Michael locked the doors and never went in there again. In the following months, he abandoned the company. He handed over management to Richard, his longtime partner, with vague instructions to keep the business running while he dealt with personal matters. Richard accepted without asking many questions. Everyone around Michael seemed to be walking on eggshells, afraid of saying the wrong word and making him fall apart completely. The house became a mausoleum. Clara continued to come daily, cleaning rooms no one used, preparing meals Michael barely touched. She tried to talk, to make small talk, to bring some normality, but he responded with monosyllables and soon locked himself in his office. It was during this period that he developed the ritual that would become his only anchor. Every Wednesday, without fail, he would drive to the City of London Cemetery in East London. There, in a well-kept garden, were 3 discreet plaques with the names of Beatrice, Laura, and Julia. It wasn't exactly a grave, but a place of tribute that Beatrice's family had insisted on creating. Michael always brought the most expensive flowers he could find. Imported roses, rare orchids, giant white lilies. He spent fortunes on those flowers, as if their price could somehow compensate for everything he hadn't done in life. He would sit on the stone bench in front of the plaques and talk. He spoke of regrets, of the custody he never really fought for, of the idiotic pride that prevented him from fighting for his daughters when Beatrice threatened to leave. Because that was the truth that gnawed at him from the inside. He could have prevented it all. Months before the disappearance, his relationship with Beatrice was falling apart. Constant arguments, icy silences, the feeling that they were living like strangers under the same roof. She wanted attention, presence, emotional involvement. He offered material comfort, financial stability, a life of luxury. It wasn't enough, it never was. When Beatrice first mentioned separation, Michael reacted with calculated indifference. If that's what you want, fine, let's handle it civilly. She wanted him to fight, to show that he cared. He interpreted it as manipulation and pulled away even further. The issue of the girls' custody was treated almost like a bureaucratic detail. Beatrice proposed to have them during the week, and he would have them on weekends. Michael agreed without question, confident that his money would guarantee unrestricted access to his daughters whenever he wanted. He didn't realize he was giving away his most precious possessions out of sheer emotional laziness. Lawyers were called, papers signed, agreements made, all very rational, very adult, very civilized. Beatrice left the mansion with the twins on a January afternoon, promising to keep in frequent contact. Michael waved from the porch, certain that this was just a phase, that everything would soon settle down. It didn't settle down. Beatrice rented a flat in Islington, enrolled the girls in a new school, and began to build a separate life. Michael visited his daughters every other week, always at scheduled times, always with the discomfort of someone fulfilling an obligation. Laura and Julia, only 5 years old, didn't quite understand why their father no longer lived with them, but they accepted the situation with the resilience typical of children. Then came the disappearance, and with it, the overwhelming awareness of everything Michael had lost through omission. For the next 2 years, he became a shadow. Friends gave up calling after months without a response. His family, who had never been very close, respected his grief from a distance. The only constant was Clara, the housekeeper, who insisted on maintaining some order in that house, plunged into emotional chaos. "You need to eat properly, sir," she would say, leaving carefully prepared plates on the kitchen table. "You need to go out a bit, get some sun, see people. You need to live, Mr. Taylor. They wouldn't want to see you like this." But how could he live when guilt weighed like lead? How could he move on knowing he had had every opportunity to be a present father and had wasted every one of them? How could he accept that the last memories Laura and Julia had of him were probably of a distant man, always too busy, always with his head somewhere else? The girls' rooms remained untouched. Michael wouldn't let Clara clean them. Dust gathered on the toys, the colors of the drawings on the walls slowly faded, but he needed it to stay exactly as it was. It was his way of keeping alive the last evidence that they had existed, that it wasn't all just a bad dream from which he would eventually wake up. At night, when insomnia struck, he would wander the house like a ghost. He would stop at the doors of the rooms, rest his forehead against the cold wood, and force himself to remember the smell of strawberry shampoo that Laura liked, the way Julia always called Daddy, dragging out the final why, the laughter when he pretended to be a monster and chased them around the garden, scarce, fragile, precious memories. One winter morning, 2 years and 3 months after the disappearance, Michael woke up with a different feeling. It wasn't exactly hope, but a restlessness that stirred something dormant within him. Perhaps it was just accumulated exhaustion, his body calling for a change of routine. He decided to make his weekly visit to the memorial earlier than usual. He put on the same dark suit he wore for every visit, grabbed the keys to his BMW, and drove through the still sleepy city. The City of London Cemetery was a long way from West London, requiring a drive across almost the entire city, but Michael liked the journey. It was time to think, to prepare himself emotionally for the symbolic encounter with what he had lost. He arrived around 9 in the morning. The garden was empty, as it always was at that hour. Gardeners worked silently in a distant area. Michael parked, took the bouquet of white lilies. He had bought at a luxury florist in Canary Wharf and walked to the space where the plaques were. He sat on the usual bench, carefully placed the flowers, and began the mental conversation he religiously maintained. He spoke about the emptiness of the week, about decisions he needed to make at the company, about how the house seemed increasingly larger and colder. He asked for forgiveness, as he always did, for his cowardice, for his omission, for being a mediocre father when he had the chance to be extraordinary. "I should have fought for you," he murmured, his voice hoarse from disuse. "I should have ignored my idiotic pride and shown Beatrice that you were everything to me, but I was so caught up in my own importance. I thought money solved everything, that my presence didn't make a difference. How wrong I was." The cold July wind rustled the trees around him, creating a whispering symphony. Michael closed his eyes, trying to imagine the girls playing in that garden, running among the flowers, laughing in that contagious way only children can laugh. When he opened his eyes again, he was startled. A girl was standing a few feet away from him. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. Thin, dark-haired, with her hair in a messy ponytail. She wore simple, slightly worn, but clean clothes, and she was looking at Michael with a disturbing intensity. "Sorry to bother you, mister," she said, her voice firm despite her age. "But are you Michael Taylor?" Michael blinked, confused. "I am." "Why?" The girl took a step forward, her hands nervously fidgeting with the hem of her t-shirt. "My name is Isabella, and I think I know your daughters." The world seemed to stop. The sound of birds vanished. The wind ceased. Michael couldn't process what he had just heard. "What did you say?" "Your daughters, Laura and Julia. They live near my house, in the Beckton Estates." The Beckton Estates, deep in Tower Hamlets, one of the poorest areas in the city, the complete opposite of the universe where Beatrice and the girls had lived. Michael felt his heart race. "Little girl, you must be mistaken. My daughters, they're no longer—" "I know what everyone thinks," Isabella interrupted him, speaking quickly now as if afraid he would leave. "But they're there. I swear, I saw their pictures. In an old newspaper my mum saved. It's the same face, they're twins, right? Laura is the chattier one and Julia is quieter. They have a tiny mole on their right arm, right here," she pointed to her own arm, "and they call their mum B. B, short for Beatrice. The mole on the arm. Laura had one. Julia too." Michael stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the flowers. "Where exactly are they? Take me there, now." Isabella took a step back, frightened by his intensity. I don't know if—" "Please." Michael's voice broke. "Please, little girl. If you're telling the truth, if there's any chance it's them, I need to see, I'm begging you." Something in his expression must have convinced Isabella. She nodded slowly. "Okay, but you have to go slow. You can't show up shouting or scaring anyone. B is very suspicious, and the girls, they won't recognize you." "Why wouldn't they recognize me?" Isabella bit her lip, clearly uncomfortable. "Because B told them their father didn't want anything to do with them, that he abandoned them and never looked for them again." The revelation was like a punch to the gut. Michael staggered, having to lean on the bench. Beatrice had lied to her own daughters, erased him from their history, turned an absent father into a non-existent one. "Take me to them," he managed to say, his voice little more than a whisper. "Please." The journey to the Beckton Estates was surreal. Isabella gave directions, Michael drove on autopilot. The city changed drastically as they headed towards the East End. Modern buildings gave way to irregular constructions. Wide avenues turned into narrow streets. Smooth asphalt yielded to potholes and uneven cobblestones. Michael observed everything with growing disbelief. How could Beatrice, raised with a silver spoon, educated in the best schools, accustomed to luxury, be living here? And the girls, Laura and Julia, who attended an expensive bilingual school, who had private ballet and piano lessons, who had never known any reality other than absolute comfort. "It's here," Isabella said, pointing to a narrow alley. Michael parked the car, aware that the BMW stood out here like a flying saucer. He followed Isabella between cramped houses, peeling walls, children playing barefoot in the street, the smell of cheap food being cooked, mixed with the odor of poorly treated sewage. It was another world. They stopped. In front of a small single-story house with faded paint. Isabella hesitated. "They're usually in the back garden this time of day. I'll call them quietly, but you stay here, okay?" Michael nodded, unable to speak. His heart was beating so hard, he feared he might faint. Isabella went through the slightly ajar gate. A few seconds passed. Then Michael heard children's voices. Laughter, the most beautiful and most painful sound he had ever experienced. Two girls came running to the gate, following Isabella. They stopped when they saw Michael, and his world imploded. It was them, Laura and Julia, older, thinner, with simple clothes and unevenly cut hair. But it was them. The same expression in their dark eyes, the same shape of their faces, the same mannerisms he had forced himself to forget. "Laura," he managed to say, his voice strangled. "Julia." The girls looked at him with complete bewilderment. There was no recognition, no affection, only confusion. "Who are you, mister?" Laura, always the more fearless one, asked. Michael fell to his knees right there, on the dirty street of the Beckton Estates, and cried. He cried 2 years of accumulated pain, of crushing guilt, of sleepless nights. He cried for the injustice of having found his daughters, only to realize they didn't know who he was. "I'm your father," he managed to say between sobs. "I'm your father, and I never, ever abandoned you." The girls looked at each other, scared. They took a few steps back. That's when Beatrice appeared at the door of the house, thin, aged, her face marked with stress lines that hadn't existed before. She stopped on the threshold and turned completely pale upon seeing Michael there. For a moment no one moved. Time froze in that forgotten alley in East London. Then Beatrice spoke, her voice trembling. "Michael, how did you find us?" He stood up slowly, wiping the tears with the back of his hand. When he spoke, there was an icy determination in his voice that he didn't know he possessed. "We need to talk. Now. And you're going to explain every second of the hell you created." The children watched the scene without understanding. Isabella kept her distance, and there, in that unlikely setting, the truth about 2 years of lies, manipulation, and a pain that seemed endless began to unfold. But Michael Taylor was no longer the broken man who visited empty memorials. At that moment, looking at the daughters he had thought were lost forever, he became someone else. Someone who would fight. Someone who would never give up again. Someone who had finally understood that some things were worth more than pride, more than resentment, more than anything in this world. And he was ready to prove it, no matter how long it took. The tiny living room of the house in the Beckton Estates seemed to shrink even further with the tension that filled every inch of the air. Michael sat on a worn-out sofa, its springs groaning with every movement. Beatrice remained standing, leaning against the opposite wall, her arms crossed in a defensive posture. The girls had been sent to the back garden with Isabella, but Michael knew they were trying to listen through the slightly open window. "So?" Michael broke the heavy silence. "Are you going to stand there staring at me, or are you going to start explaining this whole madness?" Beatrice ran a hand over her face, a gesture of deep exhaustion. She looked as if she had aged 10 years in the two. That had passed. Her hair, once always impeccable, was tied in a messy bun. Her makeup-free skin revealed deep, dark circles. Her clothes were simple, faded. Nothing remained of the sophisticated woman who had once hosted dinner parties in Kensington. "You weren't supposed to find us," she finally said, her voice low. "I took every precaution. How did you manage it? Answer my question first. Why, Beatrice? Why do this? Make everyone believe you had disappeared. Let me believe I had lost my daughters. Because I had to protect them." Her voice rose, thick with emotion. You don't understand what was happening. You were never present enough to understand. Michael stood up abruptly. Then explain it to me now. Make me understand how you justify destroying my life, lying to our daughters, creating this entire charade. Beatrice walked to the small window overlooking the street, her back to him. When she began to speak, her voice was more controlled, but laden with a sadness that seemed to have been cultivated for years. My family was never what it seemed, Michael. You met my parents at those formal dinners, always elegant, always smiling, but you didn't know the dark side. My father's shady business dealings, the debts he accumulated gambling on risky investments, the dangerous people he got involved with. She turned to face him. When we separated, I thought I'd be free of all that. But my father dragged me back in. He said he needed my name on some documents, that it was just a formality. I was an idiot, Michael, so idiotic that I signed without reading properly. And by the time I realized what I'd gotten myself into, it was too late. What kind of documents? Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Guarantees for loans, co-signatures, things that compromised not only me but the girls. Men started showing up, calling in the middle of the night, making veiled threats. They said if my father didn't pay what he owed, they would collect in other ways. Her voice trembled. They mentioned the children, Michael. They said their names. Michael's stomach churned. And you didn't tell me. You didn't ask for help? For what? So you could solve everything with money, like you always did? So you could look at me with that superior attitude as if I were incompetent? I had pride too, Michael. And I was scared. Scared of what you would think of me, of what you would do. I would have protected you. I would have used every penny, every contact, every resource I have to keep you safe. You can't solve everything with money. Not these people. They wanted to make an example. And my father, he just vanished, left the debts behind and disappeared. The threats got worse. One day they found where I was living in Islington. They left a note on the door. They said I had 1 week. Beatrice sat down in an old chair at the dining table, her hands shaking. I panicked. I thought about going to the police, but I knew that would only make it worse. Then I met someone who helped me, someone who understood this kind of situation. They offered me a way out, disappear completely, create new identities, start over somewhere no one would look for us. And you thought the solution was to cut me out of the girls' lives completely? To make them believe I abandoned them? I needed them to forget their old life. I couldn't risk some comment, some memory leading someone to us, and you... She hesitated. You were never really present, Michael. Admit it. You visited twice a month, stayed for a few hours, more concerned with your phone than with them. It was easy to make them forget because there wasn't much to remember. The words were like daggers because they were true. Michael felt his legs weaken and sat down again. I know I was an absent father, he said, his voice hoarse. I know I prioritized work, that I was selfish, that I wasted time I'll never get back. But that didn't give you the right to erase my existence. It didn't give you the right to create this lie. I was desperate. Do you understand what it's like to look at your daughters and know that someone could hurt them at any moment? I did what I thought I had to do to protect them. By staging a charade, forging documents, creating a fake memorial service. Beatrice looked down. I met a doctor who was willing to sign irregular papers. He needed money to cover his own debts. We created a false medical history, an emergency record, documentation that justified what happened. Someone in the press published the story without checking properly. It all happened too fast. Before I could turn back, the story had already spread. And you just let it. You let me believe the three of you were dead. I thought you would get over it, that you would move on, that you would rebuild your life. Michael let out a bitter laugh. Get over it. Beatrice, I spent 2 years in a private hell. I locked the girls' rooms and never went in there again. I abandoned my company. I lived like a ghost, visiting that memorial every week, talking to empty plaques. Do you have any idea what it's like to wake up every day with the guilt of not having fought for your daughters when you could, of knowing that the last memories they have of you are of a mediocre father? For the first time, Beatrice seemed genuinely shaken. I didn't know that you You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You were so focused on your own survival that you forgot I existed too. That I loved these children too, even if in a completely flawed way. A heavy silence filled the room. From the garden, children's voices came muffled. Laura was asking Isabella a question. Julia was giggling at something. "And the girls?" Michael asked, trying to control his voice. "How are they? How has it been for them?" Beatrice sighed deeply. "Difficult. In the beginning it was terrible. They asked about you, cried, didn't understand anything. I had to be firm. Tell them you had made a choice. That you didn't want to come with us. That you had decided work was more important. Eventually they stopped asking. You poisoned the image they had of me. I did what I needed to do for them to adapt. It was the only way for us to move forward. Here nobody asks questions. We're just another family struggling to survive." The girls went to a local state school. They learned to live with less. Much less. Michael looked around the tiny house. The furniture was old, patched up. The walls had damp patches. There was no air conditioning, just an old fan slowly turning. It was the complete opposite of the Kensington mansion. "How do you support yourself?" "I do cleaning jobs. I look after neighbors' children. I take odd jobs when I can. It's enough to eat and pay the rent. It's not the life we had, but it's safe. No one looks for us here." "And you think this is fair to the girls? Taking them away from everything they knew, from all comfort, and bringing them to this? I'd rather they be alive and with little than comfortable and in danger." The argument was escalating again. Michael took a deep breath, trying to calm down. He needed to think strategically. He couldn't let emotion take over. "You know you can't go on like this, right? That this whole situation is unsustainable?" "What do you mean?" "Officially, the three of you don't exist. The girls have no future without proper documentation. They can't apply to university, they can't work legally, they can't truly live. And you're a wanted person. You may not know it, but there are ongoing investigations. Suspicious disappearance, possible document fraud. If anyone finds out where you are..." Beatrice turned pale. "How do you know that?" "Because I kept lawyers working on the case. Because I never accepted that you just vanished without explanation. There are people still investigating. Are you going to report me?" There was genuine fear in her voice now. Michael was silent for a long moment, pondering. It would have been easy to say yes, hand Beatrice over to the authorities, make her pay for everything. But would that be better for the girls? To watch their mother being taken away by the police? "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I know this has to end. The girls need to exist again, and they need to know the truth. They're too young to understand all this. They're 7 now. They understand more than you think, and they deserve to know that their father didn't abandon them. That I spent 2 years destroying myself inside because I thought I had lost you forever." Beatrice stood up, pacing nervously. "And what do you want? To be part of their lives again, as if nothing happened?" "I want the chance to be the father I never was. I want to make up for lost time. I want them to grow up knowing they have a father who loves them, even if I failed miserably at showing it before. They won't just accept you. They'll be scared. They'll resist. Then I'll have to earn that right, slowly, with patience, with true presence." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Beatrice went to answer it, and returned with a thin man in his 50s, wearing simple clothes and a suspicious look. "B, Isabella said there's a rich fella here. Everything all right?" "It's fine, Mr. Jenkins. It's a complicated situation, but it's under control." The man gave Michael an appraising look. "If you need anything, just shout. We look after our own here." When he left, Beatrice turned to Michael. "See? Here I have a community, people who protect us. Do you think you can just show up and take my daughters away?" "Our daughters, Beatrice. Ours. And no, I'm not going to just rip them away from here, but we will need to find a solution. Something that's better for them than this life of lies." Beatrice sat down again, looking exhausted. "I don't know if I can trust you." "I don't know if I can trust you either after all this. But the girls need stability. They need a future. And frankly, They need both their parents, no matter how imperfect we are. From the garden, Laura shouted for her mother. Beatrice stood up automatically, but Michael held her by the arm. "Let me go. Please. Let me at least talk to them." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "But go slow. Don't mention anything we talked about in here. Not yet." Michael went out the back door and found the three girls sitting under a scrawny mango tree. Isabella was the first to notice his presence. "Did you talk to Bea?" "We did." He crouched down to be at their level. "Isabella, can I ask you a favor? I need to talk to Laura and Julia alone, just for a few minutes." The girl looked at the twins, who nodded, that it was okay. She got up and went inside the house, leaving Michael alone with his daughters. For a moment, no one spoke. Michael watched them, trying to memorize every detail. Laura's hair was a little shorter, cut unevenly as if Beatrice had done it herself. Julia wore a t-shirt that was too big, probably a hand-me-down from another child. Both were barefoot, their feet dirty with soil. "Do you remember me?" he asked softly. The girls looked at each other. Laura answered, "Not really. Mum showed us some old photos, said you were our dad, but that you didn't want to be with us." Every word was a blade. "And what if I told you that's not true, that I always wanted to be with you, but I didn't know where you were?" Julia, the quieter one, spoke for the first time. "Why would Mum lie?" "Because sometimes adults do things they think are right even when they're not. Your mum was trying to protect you, but in the process, she ended up hiding some truths." "Like what?" Laura crossed her arms, defiant even at 7. "Like the fact that I never stopped looking for you, that every single day for these 2 years I woke up thinking about you, that I visited a special place every week just to talk to you, even when I thought you weren't here anymore." "Here where?" Julia asked, confused. Michael realized he was being too vague. "Let me explain better. There was a time when Mummy and I lived together with you. You were very little. Then Mummy and I decided it was better to live separately. But I was still your father. I still visited. I still cared." "Then you disappeared," Laura said, as if it were an established fact. "No, you disappeared. Mummy had her reasons she thought were good, but the result was that you were far away from me, and I was alone, thinking I had lost you forever." The girls seemed to be processing this, trying to fit this new version with what their mother had told them. "If you're here now, are you going to stay?" Julia asked, and there was something in her voice, a tentative hope, that broke Michael's heart. "I really want to stay. I want to be part of your lives. But it will depend on a lot of things. On you wanting it too. On us being able to solve some complicated problems, on Mummy agreeing." "We live in a really small house," Laura said, in an almost apologetic tone. "There's no spare room for you." Michael smiled, his eyes burning with unshed tears. "I have a house, a big house, with rooms that have been empty for a long time waiting for you." "Is it far from here?" "A little. But you've lived there before, when you were very little." The girls were silent again. Then Julia slowly stood up and walked over to Michael. She reached out, her tiny hand, lightly touching his face as if testing if he was real. "You're crying," she said, her voice soft. "Sometimes adults cry when they're very happy. And I'm very happy that I found you." Laura approached too, more cautiously. "Do you promise you won't disappear again?" "I promise, with everything I have, with everything I am, I will never disappear again." It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. But Julia kept her little hand on Michael's face for a few more seconds, and Laura stood nearby, watching with less suspicion. They were tiny steps, but they were steps. Beatrice appeared at the door, her arms crossed. "Time to come in, it's getting dark." The girls obeyed immediately, going into the house. Michael stood up, wiping his face. "I have to go," he said, "but I'll be back tomorrow, and we need to keep talking about how to solve this, about the future." "Michael," Beatrice hesitated, "I know I caused you immense pain, and I know there isn't enough forgiveness in the world for what I did, but I swear it was all for them, only for them. I know you believe that, but now we need to think together. Because whether you accept it or not, I'm back, and I'm never leaving again." He walked to his car, aware that curious eyes were watching him from windows and gates. The BMW was completely out of place there, but he no longer cared. He drove back to Kensington in a state of shock. In just a few hours, his life had been turned completely upside down. The daughters he had mourned were alive. The woman he had thought dead had systematically deceived him. And now he had to figure out how to turn this chaotic reunion into something that worked. When he arrived at the mansion, Clara was still there, tidying up in the kitchen. She almost dropped a plate when she saw the expression on Michael's face. "Mr. Taylor, what happened? Are you all right?" "Clara," he said, his voice trembling, "they're alive. The girls are alive." The tray Clara was holding crashed to the floor. The waiting room of the law firm was elegant and quiet, with leather armchairs and abstract paintings on the walls. Michael had been sitting there for 20 minutes, distractedly flipping through a business magazine without absorbing a single word. Beside him, Beatrice nervously fidgeted with her hands, avoiding his gaze. 2 weeks had passed since the reunion, 2 weeks of tense conversations, delicate negotiations, and attempts to build some kind of agreement that would work for everyone, especially for Laura and Julia. "Mr. Taylor, Ms. Morris will see you now." Sylvia Morris was one of London's most respected family law solicitors. Michael knew her from corporate events, but had never needed her services until now. She greeted them with a firm handshake and led them to her spacious office overlooking Oxford Street. "So," she began, sitting behind her mahogany desk, "I've received the summary you emailed me, Michael, but I need to hear the details from both of you. What we have here is, to say the least, an extraordinary situation." Over the next hour, Beatrice told her version. The threats, the fear, the desperate decision to disappear. Michael supplemented with his perspective, the 2 years of grief, the frustrated search, the accidental reunion. Sylvia took meticulous notes, occasionally interrupting to clarify details. When they finished, she was silent for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "You both understand the legal gravity of this, correct?" She looked mainly at Beatrice. "What? You did constitute several offences: forgery of documents, fraud, obstruction of justice. If the Crown Prosecution Service becomes aware—" "I know," Beatrice interrupted, her voice low. "I know I could go to prison. But I did what I thought I had to do. Intent doesn't matter much to the law, but let's focus on what we can resolve." Sylvia turned to Michael. "Do you want to press charges against your daughter's mother?" Michael had spent sleepless nights thinking about exactly that. Part of him wanted justice. He wanted Beatrice to pay for the hell she had created. But the other part, the part that had seen the terror in her eyes when she spoke of the threats, the part that understood the desperation of a mother trying to protect her children, that part hesitated. "No," he said finally. "I don't want to press charges. I want to resolve this in the least traumatic way possible for the girls. They've suffered enough." Beatrice looked at him, surprised and clearly relieved. "Very well," Sylvia continued. "Then our focus is to regularize the children's legal status and establish a workable custody agreement. Beatrice, are you willing to accept that Michael has full parental rights?" Beatrice hesitated. "I'm scared that he'll just take them away from me." "I won't do that," Michael said, looking directly at her. "As much as I might want to, I know that tearing them away from you would be yet another trauma in their lives. But I also can't let them live in those conditions, without documentation, without a future, without possibilities." "What do you suggest?" Sylvia asked. "True shared custody, not the farce we had before. They can stay with me during the week, go to school, have the structure they need, and spend weekends with Beatrice if they want, or the other way around. Whatever works best for them." "And me?" Beatrice asked. "Am I supposed to keep living in that hovel, seeing my daughters only now and then?" "You can live in the house," Michael said, and saw her eyes widen. "The mansion is huge. There's an entire wing I never use. You could have your own space. The girls would have access to both parents under the same roof. It would be a smoother transition." "Are you crazy?" Live in your house. For the stability of our daughters. Yes, I'm willing to do that, Sylvia intervened. It's a creative solution, and it would likely be viewed favorably by the court. It demonstrates a commitment to the children's well-being. But, Beatrice, you would need to undergo a psychological evaluation and probably agree to counseling, at least for a while. Psychological counseling? Beatrice was visibly tense. It's standard in complex custody cases, and considering everything that's happened, it would be important to demonstrate that you are emotionally fit to care for the girls. It's not a punishment, it's a protection. For you and for them. Beatrice was silent, clearly struggling internally. Michael waited, giving her time. All right, she said finally. I accept. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want my daughters to be okay. Our daughters, Michael corrected gently. In the following weeks, life became a whirlwind of legal procedures. Sylvia managed to get a temporary injunction granting Michael supervised visitation rights. A social worker began making regular visits, first to the Beckton estates, then to the mansion in Kensington. When Michael officially proposed that the girls move into his house, the reaction was mixed. Laura showed cautious excitement at the idea of a big house with a garden and a pool. Julia, more, attached to her mother, cried for hours. I don't want to go, she sobbed, clinging to Beatrice. I want to stay here with you. I'm coming too, my love, Beatrice explained, holding her daughter. We're all going to live there, you, me, Laura, and your father. But this is our home. That will be our new home. And it will be better, you'll see. There's space to play. You'll have your own real bedroom. You won't have to share that mattress with Laura anymore. The move happened on a rainy Tuesday in August. Michael hired a professional team, but there was so little to transport that the truck was barely used. Some clothes, a few shabby toys, personal items that fit into 3 boxes. It was sad to realize how their lives had been reduced to that. When they arrived at the mansion, the girls stood frozen at the entrance. Isabella was with them, invited by Michael to help with the transition. Clara had prepared a special lunch and decorated the rooms that would be the twins. It's so big, Laura murmured, her eyes wide. Shall we have a tour? Michael suggested, trying to sound casual despite the tension he felt. He showed them every room, observing their reactions. The living room with the grand piano that no one had played in years, the library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, the modern kitchen that Clara kept impeccable, and finally, the bedrooms. I decorated these rooms when you were babies, Michael explained, opening the first door. I never had the heart to change anything after you left. The room was exactly as Laura had left it at 5 years old. Light pink walls, curtains with butterflies, a collection of stuffed animals arranged on the bed. The dust had been removed, but everything was preserved. Laura entered slowly, touching things as if they were relics from a past life. I remember this, she said suddenly, picking up a rag doll. Clarabelle, I remember Clarabelle. Julia joined her, looking around with a mixture of fascination and confusion. Did we really live here? You did, Beatrice answered from the doorway, her voice choked with emotion. When you were very little. The other room was similar, but decorated in shades of lilac. Julia found a musical mobile, and when she turned it, a soft melody began to play. She froze. This music. I know this. Music. I used to sing it to you to help you sleep, Michael said, feeling emotion tighten his throat. Every night. For a moment, it seemed Julia was going to cry. But she just stood there, listening to the little tune, some ancient memory trying to surface. Isabella broke the moment. Do you have a pool? Can I see it? The rest of the afternoon was spent exploring the property. The girls gradually began to relax. The pool was an absolute hit. The garden with the playground area that Michael had renovated generated squeals of excitement. Even Beatrice seemed less tense, sitting on a deck chair watching her daughters play. But the night brought the first challenges. Julia had a violent nightmare. She woke up screaming, disoriented, looking for her mother. Beatrice ran to the room, but Julia was inconsolable, trembling, muttering nonsensical things about bad men and not finding Mummy. Michael appeared at the door, unsure whether to enter or not. Beatrice looked at him, lost, and gestured for him to approach. "Hey, little one," he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You're safe. We're all here." "I dreamt they took Mummy away," Julia sobbed. "And I was left alone in a dark place. That's not going to happen. Your mum is here, I'm here, and this house is safe. No one is going to hurt anyone, understand?" It took almost an hour to calm her down. When she finally fell asleep again, Michael and Beatrice left the room and went to the living room. "Does she have these nightmares often?" he asked. "Almost every night, since we arrived in the estates. She was too young to understand everything that was happening, but she absorbed the fear, the anxiety. We need professional help for both of them." "I know, but therapy is expensive and—" "Beatrice, money is not a problem. It never was. I'll hire the best child psychologists in London. I'll do whatever it takes to help them process this trauma." She nodded, looking exhausted. "Thank you for not making this harder than it already is. Thank you for agreeing to come back. I know it wasn't easy." In the following days, they established a routine. Michael enrolled the twins in the same bilingual school they had attended before, using temporary documentation Sylvia had obtained, while they regularized the legal situation permanently. Beatrice began therapy, twice a week with a psychiatrist specializing in trauma. The girls started sessions with a child psychologist who used art therapy and play to help them process everything they had lived through. Clara proved to be a precious ally. She treated the girls with a combination of affection and firmness, setting clear boundaries but always with love. She cooked their favorite foods, helped with homework, and told them stories before bed. Isabella became a constant presence. Michael enrolled her in the same school as the twins, paid for a private tutor to help her catch up academically, and insured her. Mother received proper medical treatment. The girl was crucial in keeping Laura and Julia connected to the reality they knew, serving as a bridge between two very different worlds. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Laura developed obsessive behaviors. She organized her belongings excessively, having a meltdown if anything was out of the order she had established. During a therapy session, the psychologist explained to Michael that it was the girl's way of having control over something, since so much in her life had been completely out of her control. Julia, on the other hand, became extremely quiet. She would spend hours drawing disturbing scenes, houses on fire, people hiding, threatening dark figures. The psychologist used these drawings to understand what was going on in the girl's mind, helping her to verbalize fears she didn't even know she had. And then there was the runaway incident. It was on a Thursday. Laura had argued with Julia over something trivial, and the argument escalated. When Beatrice tried to intervene, Laura screamed that she hated her new life, that she wanted to go back to when everything was simple. She ran to her room, locked herself in, and when Michael finally managed to open the door, the window was open, and Laura was gone. The panic was instant and visceral. Michael called the police. Beatrice collapsed. Clara ran through the neighboring streets, shouting the girl's name. 2 hours of absolute desperation, until a security guard from a nearby gated community called to say he had found a crying girl sitting on a park bench. When Michael got there and saw her, small and frightened, something inside him broke for good. He knelt in front of her, trembling. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Laura shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what I wanted. Everything's so confusing in my head. Come here." For the first time since the reunion, Michael truly hugged her, and to his surprise, she hugged him back, clinging to him as if she were drowning, and he was the only solid thing in the midst of the chaos. "I can't stand being scared anymore," she whispered. "I can't stand not knowing if they're going to take me away from somewhere again, if they're going to separate me from Ju, from Mum, from you now. I just want everything to stay like this, for no one to ever disappear again. No one is going to disappear, I promise. We're all staying together." He took her back home, where Beatrice hugged her, crying, and Julia didn't let go of her sister's hand for the rest of the night. It was a terrible moment, but also a revealing one. The girls were starting to trust, and with trust came vulnerability. It was after this episode that Beatrice approached Michael for a serious conversation. He was in his office, reviewing company documents he had neglected for months. "May I come in?" "Of course. Sit down." She settled into the armchair, looking as if she had aged years in the past few weeks. "I need to say something about all of this." Michael waited. "I was wrong. About so many things. About lying to the girls. About taking you out of their lives. About thinking that money and comfort were just your way of not getting emotionally involved." She took a deep breath. "You've changed. You're really present. Really trying. And I'm so sorry. For everything." They were the first genuine words of remorse she had spoken. Michael felt something shift inside him, a bit of the anger dissolving. "I was wrong too about prioritizing work, about thinking being a good provider was enough, about not fighting when I should have. We made a lot of mistakes, Beatrice, but at least now we have a chance to do better. The girls deserve better than what we've given them so far. I agree, and we're going to give it to them. But the biggest challenge was yet to come, the legal matter of permanent custody." The Crown Prosecution Service had become aware of the case through the social worker. A prosecutor was assigned, and now there was a formal investigation into the girl's disappearance and the circumstances surrounding it. Beatrice was summoned to give a statement. She spent 3 hours in a closed room, recounting everything that had happened, the threats, the debts, the desperate decision. When she came out, she was pale and trembling. "Are they going to prosecute me?" Sylvia, who had accompanied her, shook her head. "The prosecutor is pragmatic. She saw that you acted out of fear, not malice. And the fact that Michael doesn't want to press charges carries a lot of weight. But you will need to undergo a full psychiatric evaluation and accept treatment if it's recommended. Okay, whatever it takes." The evaluation was intense. 3 long sessions with a forensic psychiatrist, psychological tests, detailed interviews. The final report was complex, identifying unprocessed trauma, severe anxiety disorder, but no impairment that would prevent responsible motherhood. The recommendation was continued therapy and quarterly follow-ups. Finally, the day of the custody hearing arrived. Michael, Beatrice, Sylvia, and a representative from the CPS sat in a formal courtroom. The judge, a man in his 60s with a stern expression, read all the documents in silence before beginning. "This is, without a doubt, one of the most unusual cases I have ever presided over. Mrs. Beatrice, what you did was extreme and would constitute serious crimes under other circumstances. But I understand that you acted under duress and fear." He turned to Michael. "And you, Mr. Taylor, have shown maturity by not seeking revenge, focusing instead on the well-being of the children." He leafed through the psychological reports. "The girls are adapting. They show signs of trauma, but are responding well to treatment. Both parents demonstrate genuine commitment." The silence in the room was tense. "I will grant full joint custody. The girls will be under the legal responsibility of both parents. The current living arrangement, with everyone under the same roof, can continue as long as it works for the children. But there will be biannual follow-ups by a social worker for the next 2 years. Any significant change in the situation must be reported to the court." Relief flooded the room. "As for you, Mrs. Beatrice," the judge continued more seriously, "I will not prosecute you criminally, but this is conditional. I require continuous therapy, quarterly reports, and irreproachable behavior. If there is any deviation, I will reconsider." "Yes, Your Honor." "Thank you." When they left the courthouse, Beatrice allowed herself to cry with relief. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "It's forward from here. No looking back." "Forward," she agreed. That night, they gathered the girls in the living room and explained, in terms they could understand, that they now officially had 2 parents who would take care of them, together. Laura asked, "And no one's going to take us away again?" "No," Michael answered firmly. "You're home. And home isn't a place you're taken from. It's where you belong." Julia snuggled into Beatrice's lap, but reached her little hand out to Michael, who held it. They were small moments, small victories, but that was how you rebuilt a family, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. 3 years had passed since that morning at the City of London cemetery when Isabella had changed everything. Michael Taylor sat in the office he now shared with Richard, his partner, reviewing the final documents for a project that had consumed his thoughts for the past few months. But it wasn't a real estate venture, it was something entirely different. He looked out the window and watched the hustle and bustle on the streets of Canary Wharf. London pulsed outside with its usual chaotic energy, but within him there was a peace he hadn't known in years. Perhaps he had never truly known it. The phone rang. It was Clara. "Mr. Taylor, just a reminder that Julia's school play is today, 3 o'clock. "It's in my calendar, Clara. I wouldn't miss it for the world." "And Laura asked if you could pick up that specific art supply she needs for her project. I left the name on a note on the fridge. I'll buy it on my way. Anything else?" "Mrs. Beatrice called to say she'll be a little late today. Her meeting at the clinic ran over." Beatrice now worked as an intake coordinator at the psychiatric clinic, where she had undergone her own treatment. After 2 years of intensive therapy, she had not only processed her traumas but had found purpose in helping others going through similar situations. The salary wasn't high, but the fulfillment she showed was undeniable. "No problem. Tell her we'll see her at dinner." He hung up and returned to the documents. The project had a simple but powerful name: the Fresh Starts Foundation, a foundation dedicated to supporting families in crisis, especially those dealing with trauma, complex separations, and emotionally vulnerable children. The idea had been born 6 months after the reunion with his daughters. Michael realized that his story, as painful as it was, could help others. He talked to Beatrice, who supported it immediately. They started small: support groups for separated parents, workshops on family communication, free therapy sessions for underprivileged children. But the project grew. Richard joined as a co-founder, contributing his business expertise. Sylvia Morris offered pro bono legal consultation. Psychologists volunteered, and stories began to emerge. Parents who hadn't seen their children in years managed to reconnect. Children living in dysfunctional homes found support. Shattered families discovered paths to reconstruction. The Fresh Starts Foundation quickly became a benchmark in London, and Isabella was the first major beneficiary. The girl who had revealed everything was now 14, a second-year student at an excellent private secondary school. Her mother, who had been battling addiction when Isabella found Michael, had been clean for 3 years and was working as an administrative assistant at the foundation itself. Isabella remained a constant figure in the twins' lives. More than friends, they were sisters of the heart. They shared secrets, fought over silly things, studied together, and laughed until they couldn't breathe. Her presence balanced the family dynamic in a way no one could have predicted. The phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. Michael Taylor. "Mr. Taylor, my name is Frank Anderson. I read about your foundation in the newspaper, and I need help." Michael grabbed a notepad. "Tell me. I'm listening." For the next 20 minutes he heard the story of a father who hadn't seen his daughter in 5 years due to a traumatic separation. His ex-wife had moved to another county without leaving any contact information. He was searching, but without resources or direction, he didn't know where to start. "I'll connect you with our legal team," Michael said, "and you can join the support groups we have on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I can't promise miracles, Frank, but I can promise you're not alone in this." When he hung up, he felt that familiar sense of purpose. Every story he helped resolve was a small piece of his own redemption. At 3 o'clock sharp, he was sitting in the audience of the school theatre between Beatrice and Clara. Laura was on Beatrice's other side, nervously fidgeting with her phone. Julia was backstage, preparing to act in a play about environmental sustainability. "Is she nervous?" Michael asked. "Very," Laura replied without taking her eyes off her phone. "But she's happy too. She's rehearsed so much I know all her lines by heart." "Your father asked about Julia, not about you memorizing her lines," Beatrice said, but there was humor in her voice. "I know, Mum, but you know Ju. She makes us memorize everything along with her." The lights dimmed. The theatre fell silent, and the play began. Julia entered the stage in a makeshift tree costume, and Michael felt his chest tighten with pride. She was so different from the scared little girl of 3 years ago, more confident, more expressive, more alive. When she finished and took her final bow, he and Laura were the first to stand and applaud. Beatrice had tears in her eyes. Clara was discreetly blowing her nose. Backstage, Julia ran to them, her face flushed with excitement. "So? How was it? Did I forget any lines?" "You were perfect," Laura said, hugging her sister. "Way better than everyone else." "That opinion is totally biased," Julia laughed, "but I'll take it." Michael knelt down to be at her level. "I'm so proud of you, so very proud." "Thanks, Dad." The word came out naturally, without hesitation. It had taken almost a year for both girls to start calling him that regularly, but now it was automatic. "Shall we celebrate?" Beatrice suggested. "Pizza at the usual place." "Yes," both twins answered in unison. The usual place was a pizzeria in Soho they had discovered together, which had become a tradition for celebrations. While they waited for their orders, Michael watched his family, and yes, that's what they were now, a real family, and allowed himself a moment of pure gratitude. Laura was excitedly talking about a science project. Julia was drawing on a napkin, creating little caricatures of everyone at the table. Beatrice was laughing at something Clara had said. Isabella, who had joined them straight from her school, was stealing olives from the shared plate. "Hey," Laura got his attention. "Are you okay? You seem a bit spaced out." "I'm great, just thinking about how much everything has changed." "For the better?" Julia asked, and there was a real vulnerability in the question. Even after 3 years, she sometimes still needed reassurance. "Infinitely better," he replied, holding her hand. "I wouldn't change a thing about what we have now." Later that night, back at home, after the girls had gone to bed, Michael found Beatrice on the balcony looking out at the illuminated garden. He joined her, 2 cups of tea in his hands. "Thought you might want one." "Thanks." She took the cup, and they stood in silence for a few moments. "You know," she said eventually, "sometimes I still catch myself waiting for it all to fall apart. Like this is all too good to be true. I know what you mean, I have those moments too. But then I look at the girls, I see how happy they are, how safe they are, and I realize we did it, despite everything." "We did," he agreed, "and it wasn't easy." Beatrice chuckled softly. "Understatement of the year. It was hell in the beginning, but it was worth it. Every difficult second was worth it." She looked at him, and there was something in her gaze that Michael couldn't quite decipher. "You've become an amazing father, you." "No, the man who visited the girls twice a month and fiddled with his phone, he doesn't exist anymore. He had to die for this one to be born, and it was painful, but necessary. I've changed too. I hope for the better. Definitely for the better." "You're strong, Beatrice, you always were. You were just lost for a while." "We were both lost, but we found each other, in a very strange and twisted way, but we found each other." The next day, Michael had a full schedule. In the morning, a meeting with the Fresh Starts Foundation team. In the afternoon, an interview for a podcast on mindful parenting. In the evening, a charity event where he would present the foundation's results. The meeting was productive. They were expanding to 2 more locations, one in East London and another in Croydon. The number of families served had tripled in the last year. Success stories were piling up. During a break, the communications coordinator approached him. "Michael, we've received an offer for you to write a book, a major publisher. They want your story, but also practical guidance for parents in similar situations." "A book? You have a platform. Now thousands of people follow the foundation's work. Your talks sell out. A book could reach so many more people." Michael pondered. Exposing his story in detail would be vulnerable, painful, but if it could help even one family avoid the mistakes he had made. "I'll think about it, but I'm interested." The podcast interview was recorded in his own office. The interviewer, a journalist specializing in family behavior, asked probing questions. "Michael, you talk a lot about family reconstruction, but what about forgiveness? Have you managed to forgive Beatrice for what she did?" He took a deep breath before answering. Forgiveness is a complex word. I understood why she did what she did. I understood the fear, the desperation. But to forgive completely, I think it's an ongoing process. Some days it's easier, others it still hurts. But I chose not to let resentment poison the present, for the girls but also for myself. And if you could go back in time, what would you change? Everything. I would have been present from day one. I would have fought for custody when I had the chance. I wouldn't have let pride blind me, but I can't go back. I can only move forward and do better. What's your advice for parents going through difficult separations? Never ever use your children as a weapon or a shield. They didn't ask to be in the middle of this. Protect the relationship you have with them, even if the relationship between you has ended. And if you're absent, even for reasons that seem valid at the time, know that you will regret it. No professional success, no amount of money, nothing replaces being present in your children's lives. That evening at the charity event, Michael took the stage to present the Foundation's annual report. The audience was filled with business leaders, philanthropists, and supporters. 3 years ago, he began, I was a broken man. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. I lived in a huge mansion, but I was completely empty inside. Then something that seemed impossible happened, and my life changed completely. He told the story, edited and careful, but true. He spoke of absence and presence, of loss and reunions, of how pain can be transformed into purpose. The Fresh Starts Foundation exists because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, that families can rebuild, even after they fall apart, that genuine love and commitment can overcome almost any obstacle. He presented the numbers: 847 families served, 214 successful reconnections, 1,192 children receiving free psychological support. Each statistic represented transformed lives. But numbers don't tell human stories, so I'll share one. And he told the story of Frank Anderson, the man who had called a few days ago. With the Foundation's help, he had located his ex-wife and daughter. After careful mediation, they had their first meeting in 5 years the previous week. It wasn't perfect. There were tears, resentments, difficulties. But there was also a hug and a commitment to try. This is what we do. We build bridges where there were chasms. We light up paths that seemed blocked. We offer hope when there is only despair. The audience gave a standing ovation. Donations flowed. New partners offered their support. When he returned home that night, the mansion was quiet. Clara had already left. Beatrice was asleep, but there was a light on under the twins' bedroom door. He knocked softly. "May I come in?" "Sure." It was Laura. He found them both sitting on Julia's bed, surrounded by papers. They were working on something together. "What are you two doing up so late?" "History project," Julia explained. "We have to make a family tree, and we were a bit confused about how to do it." Michael sat on the edge of the bed. "Why?" Laura bit her lip. "Because our story is a bit complicated, isn't it? There's that part where we didn't live here, where you and Mum didn't live together, where weird things happened. And we don't know if we should put you and Mum together or separate," Julia added. "Because you're not married, but you live in the same house. Are you friends? Are you—" "What?" Michael realized this was an important conversation. "Look, the truth is that adult relationships are complicated. Your mother and I loved each other once. Then we stopped loving each other in that romantic way. But we had you, and you brought us back together in a different way. Today we are a family. Not a traditional one, but a family nonetheless. So we put you both together on the tree. Put it however makes sense to you. There's no wrong way to draw a family when that family is made of love and commitment." Laura showed him the paper. She had drawn a literal tree with branching limbs. On the trunk she had written the Taylor family. On the branches, Michael, Beatrice, Laura, Julia. And beside them, on a branch that intertwined with the others, Isabella and Clara. "Is this right?" Michael felt his eyes burn. "It's perfect." Julia snuggled up to him. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Are you happy now? Really?" It was a simple but loaded question. Michael thought about everything he had been through, the pain, the loss, the crushing guilt. but also the rebuilding, the small daily victories, the moments of genuine connection. You know, there are hard days. There are moments when I remember everything I lost, all the mistakes I made. But when I look at you, when I see the incredible young women you're becoming, when I realize I have the honor of being part of your lives, yes, I am genuinely happy. We are too, Laura said. Even when you ground us for bad grades, she added with a laugh. That's part of being a dad. You have to be annoying sometimes. They stayed there for a few more minutes, the three of them talking about the project, about school, about plans for the weekend. When he finally got up to leave, Julia held his hand. We love you, you know. Even though you were a bit absent at the beginning, we understand you were confused, and you've gotten much better. Michael knelt to be at their level. And I love you, more than I could ever express in words. You saved me. You gave me a reason to be better. He kissed each of their foreheads and left, leaving the door ajar as they liked. In the hallway he found Beatrice. She was in her dressing gown, clearly having woken up. I heard you talking. What a beautiful moment. They're growing up so fast. Soon they'll be teenagers, then adults. And we'll be here, watching every phase, together. Michael looked at her. Beatrice, thank you for agreeing to come back, for giving us this chance to rebuild, for not giving up on us, even when it would have been easier. You don't give up on family, Michael. We learned that the hard way, but we learned. 2 months later, Michael was on a much bigger stage, an international parenting conference in a luxury hotel in central London, an audience of over 1,000 people, cameras streaming online to the world. His topic, rebuilding family bonds after separative trauma. He spoke for an hour. He shared his journey, but also data, studies, practical strategies. The audience was completely engrossed. During the Q&A session, a woman raised her hand. When the microphone reached her, her voice trembled. My ex-husband took my daughter to another country 3 years ago. I don't have the resources for international legal proceedings. I don't even know if I'll ever see her again. How did you keep hope when everything seemed lost? Michael took a deep breath. I won't lie and say I always had hope. There were days when I thought the pain would never pass, that I would never see my daughters again. But what kept me going was routine, the small rituals, and eventually, the decision to turn my pain into something productive. Get in touch with the foundation. We have international partnerships. I can't promise miracles, but I can promise we will try to help. The woman nodded, wiping away tears. When the event ended, dozens of people approached him, each with a story, a request for help, a word of thanks. Michael attended to them all with patience and attention. Late that night, finally free, he returned home. The mansion was noisy. Laura and Julia were having a sleepover with Isabella and 2 friends from school. Music, laughter, the delicious chaos of childhood. Beatrice was in the kitchen making popcorn, Clara trying to maintain some order, but clearly enjoying the mess. How was it? Beatrice asked. Intense, productive, tiring. The girls wanted to wait up for you, but now there's popcorn and screaming teenagers, I understand. He went upstairs to greet the party. The girls received him with enthusiasm, introduced their friends and asked 1,000 questions about the event. Did you talk about us there? Laura wanted to know. I did. In a general way, but I did. You're the best part of my story. Even the part where we disappeared and you suffered for 2 years, Julia asked, and there was dark humor in the question. Especially that part, because it showed that true love survives anything, even the impossible. Later, much later, when silence finally returned to the house, Michael was in his room reflecting. He looked around, photos of the girls. On the walls, drawings they had made stuck up with tape. A letter Laura had written thanking him for not giving up on us even when it was hard. He picked up his phone and opened the folder of old photos. There he was, 3 years ago, sitting on that bench at the City of London cemetery, talking to empty plaques, a broken man who thought his life was over. And here he was now, still imperfect, still dealing with old guilts, but alive, present, connected. He had built more than he had recovered. The relationship he had with his daughters now was deeper than it had ever been before, because it was built on truth, on real presence, on love, demonstrated through actions, not just words. The Fresh Starts Foundation was already a consolidated reality. The book was being written. Hundreds of families were finding their way through their work, and most importantly, Laura and Julia knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that they were loved, that they had a father who would never abandon them again, that they had a mother who had made terrible choices but for reasons she believed were right, and who was working every day to be better. It wasn't a story with a perfect ending, because real life doesn't have perfect endings. It was a story of continuous reconstruction, of daily choices to do better, of love proven through consistent presence, not grand gestures. It was the story of a man who had to lose everything to learn what truly mattered, and who, given an impossible second chance, seized every second of it. He turned off the light and lay down. From the next room, he could hear the soft breathing of his daughters, finally asleep after the party. They were the most beautiful sounds in the world, because what had seemed lost forever was in fact only dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And now, finally awake, it pulsed strongly, like the heart of a house full of future, like the love of a father who had learned late but profoundly the true meaning of being present, like the promise that tomorrow would be better than today, and the day after better still. A simple promise, but a true one, and one that was kept, always kept.